Also on the Underground, there are severe delays on the Hammersmith and City line and minor delays on London Tramlink services as well. Now on the roads, on the M20, there are queues westbound to Junction 4 at Leybourne. It's because of an accident. Also following an accident, there are delays on the A127 eastbound to Gallows Corner. In Bounds Green, one lane's been closed on the North Circular Road westbound at the junction with Bounds Green Road. So as a result, there are queues on the approach.
LBC. The day. Ferrari now 0345 6060 973 LBC.
You can always
Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
OK, 10 minutes before 8 is the time. Back to our conversation about that police report in just a moment. But what's being called a planning blitz will start today. It will speed up the building of homes, hospitals and schools. And what do you think about possibly some of your high streets? Sadly, I wouldn't think there's a high street in the land that hasn't taken the odd punch as a result of COVID. What about some of those properties being turned into residential? Would you be happy to live on your high street? The advantages, of course, are enormous. If you suddenly needed a pint of milk or wanted to get your newspaper. but then presumably deliveries at early hours of the morning. Look, we'll talk about that more with you in a moment. Let's get the background to all of this with Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick, who joins me now. I notice you've written a piece in the Daily Express today, Secretary of State, which has the headline Bonfire of Red Tape. I have to be candid. I think my listeners have heard about so many bonfires of red tape, more than Guy Fawkes. Is this one actually going to put up that many flames? Good morning.
Good morning. Well, look, I think the pandemic, as you just said, has cast a long shadow over the high street. It hasn't really changed things in the sense that these market forces existed beforehand. We're all shopping more online, but it has magnified and amplified those changes. And we need to make a very flexible regime now so that businesses, particularly small business on the high street, can adapt and thrive. And the most successful town centres and high streets are ones where there's a good mix of retail, of workspaces, of leisure, and of housing. And so we're changing the law so that a business can change from a cafe to a solicitor's office, a shop, to a yoga studio, you name it, maximum flexibility for retail. But then if they can't find a good use for that premise, if it's vacant, if it's derelict, if it's an eyesore, then it can be turned into a home. And we want them to be good quality homes so that people, young and old, can be living right in the heart of their communities. And as you say, there's huge benefits for that. Access to the shops, to public services.
Yes.
It's more environmentally friendly. There's loads of positives that will come out of having more vibrant town centres.
OK, so what are the current blocks, or what is the current red tape you're setting alight then? What stops that currently?
Well, at the moment, you would have to secure planning permission. So you'd need to apply to your local council, pay fees, go through quite a long process whilst they decide if they want to allow you to turn your shop into a different type of shop or from a shop into a home. We've already changed the use classes, which is the first of those two questions, so that you can change the type of shop with great flexibility. Now we're saying that if the shop has been empty and vacant for a period of time, then you can turn it into a home without having to go through that process.
All right. While I have the benefit of you on the line, Secretary of State, can I ask you about a couple of other things? The hearts of you and some of your senior colleagues might have sunk yesterday as you saw photographs coming in from all over the United Kingdom, and I do stress the United Kingdom, of people going out and celebrating, I think it was the hottest day for more than half a century, but social distancing, I'm afraid, seems to have been left at home. How worried or worrying might this be?
Well, look, we've made huge progress as a result of the vaccine programme. That's enabling us to open up, but everybody's got to do so in a sensible and responsible way. So as we start to get these new freedoms, let's all just exercise them with caution, because we don't want to throw away the hard-won improvements that we've seen. There have been some scenes, as you say, but I don't want to overemphasise those. Let's just be careful as the good weather happens this week and at the weekend over Easter. Let's be particularly cautious and careful as we make use of these new freedoms that we've all been waiting for.
Indeed, but should the police start getting involved? Because I'm looking at photographs of mass groups of people, cities such as Nottingham. Is that where we need police action, Secretary of State?
Well, the police are involved. They have been taking their responsibilities seriously. They have been issuing notices and fines. I'm a Nottinghamshire MP, and our local force have actually done an excellent job at managing the local issues in a sensitive way. So their first instinct, of course, is to engage and to explain and to encourage people. But if there's particularly egregious abuses, then they will need to go further than that.
I guess what I'm saying, Mr. Jenrick, is there a possible, might this disrupt what you and your colleagues like to call the roadmap, or what I would call the plan to unlock?
No, I don't think there's any evidence of that. And in my department, we're working very closely with local councils so that they can plan how they manage public spaces like town centres, like beaches, how they can provide marshals and others to help people, guide them around, ensure social distancing. So a lot of effort has gone into how this can be done safely from the councils, from the retailers, the restaurants and hospitality industry when they get the opportunity to reopen. And so it's important that we as members of the public play our part as well, and do so just by behaving sensibly and pragmatically.
Britain is a model on race for other countries, with children from ethnic minorities outperforming their white peers at school. So says a landmark government review, which is obviously good news. But does that mean that Black Lives Matter was effectively a waste of time and effort?
No, I don't think it does. The Prime Minister commissioned this independent report in part because of the strength of feeling that there was in the country in the summer, and indeed there still is now, because we want to take an evidence-based approach to really dive into these issues and understand them in great detail and see what more we need to do as a country. The report hasn't actually been published yet, so it's difficult to comment in detail on its findings. But I think what it appears to say is that a good deal of progress has been made. The UK is, broadly speaking, a tolerant country. It is a successful multi-ethnic society, but that there is a lot more work to be done. It highlights a few areas where I think we've done a good job as a country. Education is one of them, where most ethnic minority communities are performing at or even above the average. There are some exceptions to that, like Black Caribbean young people, for example. And in the workplace, that is now starting to lead to a narrowing of the pay gap and greater access to the professions for people from ethnic minority backgrounds. And so there are some areas where the UK is making really significant progress that stands out by international standards. But we're not in any sense complacent. That the purpose of this report was to understand it in greater detail and to see what more we can do in the years ahead. OK,
and lastly, as fresh details emerge concerning David Cameron's lobbying for a company going on a desert camping trip with the Saudi Crown Prince linked to a journalist's murder and allegedly giving out business cards to certain people, do we need an investigation into Mr Cameron's activities?
Well, I think there has been an investigation from the professional body that looks into lobbying activities. This is the former Prime Minister a number of years ago, and his activities then and now. It's not, as far as the government is concerned today, we obviously deal with business people all the time through the pandemic. That's done appropriately with guidance from the civil service and the. Is it appropriate behaviour for the former Prime Minister of this country, do you think, Mr Jenrick? Well, former Prime Ministers have to behave appropriately. They can't conduct any lobbying activities of government for at least 2 years from the point at which they leave office. Those are the rules. I've not seen any evidence that that's been broken. But going on a desert camping trip with the Crown Prince linked to the murder of that journalist, is that appropriate behaviour, do we think? Well, he's obviously, beyond that period, a former Prime Minister or anyone who's been involved in public life is a private citizen. Who, that makes it all right, does it? They have to break bread with an individual such as that. They have to account for their own conduct, don't they? All right. OK, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you. Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick appearing here on LBC. Thank you for your time. Let's finish up the hour. We'll come to some of you talking about living on the high street. Let's do that a little bit later in the show. Let's put in some of the many tweets, texts and emails that have come in concerning the policing of that vigil down in Clapham. Anne says, while the policing actions and questions the behaviour of those attending the vigil should not go unchallenged. Respect is a two-way street. I may be old-fashioned, but my attitude towards the police is one of respect. I would agree with that. Angela says, let's point out the fact that the Duchess of Cambridge was there. She was at the vigil. She was by the bandstand, but she also wasn't wearing a mask. Don't you think she should have been? Yes, she probably should have been in hindsight, but I think a greater events took over that, perhaps, as the story moved on. All right, coming up after the news, we come to this report I've just been speaking about with the Cabinet Minister there. Britain is a model on race for other countries. Do you agree with that? What are these so-called sobriety tags? Policing Minister Kit Malthouse.
A powerful new tool which will allow offenders to maintain connections with their family, but critically not drink. We know that when they drink, they offend.